Hello, you are welcome to Tales by Flora. If you're a new subscriber, this channel is all about educative and interesting African folktales. You are all welcome. So, let's dive into this interesting story. Trust me, you will love it. That afternoon had been her final day in secondary school. The narrow streets leading to the modest Okafor family home in Onitsha. Walking slowly along that road was Obiageli Okafor. She was 18 years old, tall and graceful, with long neatly braided hair. She was beautiful in a way that often caught people's attention. Her face carried a quiet seriousness beyond her age. That afternoon has been her final day in secondary school. Most of her classmates had left the school compound in excitement, laughing loudly, talking about university dreams, celebration, and the freedom that awaits them. But Obiageri had walked home quietly. Her thoughts were heavy. She knew the truth about her family's situation. Her father's health had been failing for weeks. As she approached the small compound where they lived, she noticed something unusual. The gate stood half open. Voices drifted from inside the house, low, worried. Her heart tightened. Obiageri pushed the wooden door open gently. The room was dimming light by a small kerosene lamp placed on the table near the wall. The faint smell of medical herbs and camphor filled the air. On the old brown couch lay Mr. Chinedu Okafor, her father. He looked weak, very weak. His once broad shoulders had shrunk, and his breathing came slowly, like someone struggling to climb a steep hill. Beside him sat Mrs. Grace Okafor, Obiageli's mother, clutching her hand tightly. Her eyes were swollen from crying. When she saw Obiageli standing by the door, her lips trembled. "Obiageli, my daughter, you are back." Something inside Obiageli's chest tightened painfully. She hurried forward. "Daddy, Daddy." Her voice shook slightly as she knelt beside him. Her father turned his head slowly towards her. The strong man who once lifted heavy bags of rice in Onitsha main market now looked fragile, like a candle about to burn out. His eyes softened when he saw her. "My daughter," he whispered. Obiageli forced a smile, though fear gripped her heart. "You will be fine, Daddy. The doctor will help you." But even as she spoke, she knew those words were only hope trying to hide the truth. In the corner of the room stood her younger siblings. Kosi, 14 years old, stood silently with wide frightened eyes. Beside him was Nnenna, only 11, clutching her small doll tightly against her chest. They did not speak, they only watched. Mr. Okafor slowly raised his weak hand and reached for Obiageri's. His finger felt cold. "Obiageli, my daughter." "Yes, Daddy," she whispered quickly, holding his hands. He struggled to speak. "You are strong," tears filled her eyes. "Please don't talk like that, Daddy." But he continued, his voice faint and trembling. "Take care of them, your younger siblings." His eyes slowly moved towards Kosi and Nnenna, then to her mom. Mrs. Okafor began crying softly. Obiageri shook her head desperately. "No, Daddy, you will get better." But her father always looked at her with deep love and quiet understanding, as if he has always knew what was coming. Then slowly his eyes closed. For a moment, the room became silent. A silence so deep it felt like the world itself had stopped breathing. Then suddenly, Mrs. Okafor let out a heart-piercing cry. "Chinedu! Chinedu! Why do you choose to do this to me? Chinedu! Hey!" Her voice echoed through the small house like thunder. Kosi burst into tears. Nnenna began sobbing uncontrollably. But Obiageri remained frozen where she knelt, still holding her father's hand. Her mind struggled to accept what had just happened. The man who had once been the pillar of their home, the man who had always promised that everything would be alright, was gone. Outside, life in Onitsha continued as usual. People laughed, buses honked, vendors sold food by the roadside. But inside that small house, a family's world had shattered. And though Obiageri did not yet fully understand it, that night marked the beginning of the life she had never planned for. The days that followed Mr. Chinedu's Okafor's death passed like a dark cloud hanging over Okafor's family house in Onitsha. Their compound, which had once been filled with laughter of children and the deep voice of their father discussing business plans, was suddenly heavy with silence and grief. News of his death spread quickly through the neighborhood. Relatives began arriving from different places, some from nearby villages, others from distant towns. The small compound soon filled with mourners dressed in dark clothing, whispering words of sympathy and shaking their heads sorrowfully. Women gathered in small groups under the mango tree outside their house, discussing the tragedy. Chinedu was such a hard-working man, one woman said. Yes, another replied. And now he has left this young family behind. Inside the house, Mrs. Grace Okafor sat on a wooden stool, her wrapper loosely tied around her waist. Her eyes looked distant, as though she was lost somewhere far away in her thoughts. The shock of losing her beloved husband had struck her deeply. She spoke very little. Sometimes she simply stared at the wall for long periods of times. Obiageri noticed it all, though she was only 18. The sadness in her mother's eyes forced her to grow up overnight. She tried to stay strong for everyone. She comforted her younger siblings. She helped organize food for the visitors. She greeted relatives respectfully and thanked them for coming. But every night, when everyone else had gone to sleep, Obiageri sat quietly on the small wooden bench outside the house. That was when the tears finally came. She missed her father terribly. She missed the way he used to call her, my first pride, my queen. She missed his laughter and the way he used to carry Nnenna on his shoulder while pretending to be a giant. But more than anything, she feared the future. Because deep inside, Obiageri understood something that the others had not yet realized. Their father had been the only steady source of income for the family. Now he was gone. 2 weeks later, the burial ceremony took place. In their culture, funerals were large and elaborate. Relatives insisted on following tradition properly to honor the dead. The compound was filled with canopies, plastic chairs, and loudspeakers playing solemn music. People came in large numbers. Some cried loudly. Others spoke about the good man Chinedu Okafor had been. Food was cooked in large pots. Goat meat was shared. Palm wine flowed freely. But as Obiageli watched everything happening around her, she noticed something strange. Many of the people who spoke the loudest about love and family had rarely visited when her father was alive. And after the burial ended, something even more painful happened. The relatives began to leave one by one. Slowly, the compound became empty again. The large pots were removed, chairs disappeared, the canopies were taken down. Silence returned to the house. Silence returned to the house. On the third evening after the burial, Obiageri overheard two relatives talking near the gate. This family will struggle now, one man said. The girl is still young. What can she really do? The other replied. They shook their heads and walked away. Obiageri stood behind the door listening, her chest tightened. For the first time, fear creeps deeply into her heart. One quiet evening, Obiageri sat beside her mother inside the dimming light room. The kerosene lamp flickered gently on the wooden table. School notebooks belonging to Kosi and Nnenna were spread across the table. They still had schools to attend. Their future still depending on someone paying their fees. Mrs. Okafor sighed heavily. I do not know how we will survive. Her voice sounded tired and broken. Obiageri looked at her younger siblings. Kosi was trying to read his science textbook, but his eyes kept drifting towards their mother. Nnenna sat quietly beside him, chewing the end of her pencil. They were both too young to understand the full weight of their situation, but Obiageri understood. And that night, she made a decision. Mama, she said softly. Mrs. Okafor looked up. Yes, my daughter. I will start working. Her mother stared at her as if she had not heard correctly. Working? Yes. But Obiageri, her mother said slowly, "You just finished secondary school. You should be preparing for university." Obiageri shook her head gently. "Not now." Her voice was calm but firm. Kosi and Nnenna must finish their education first. The room fell silent immediately. Kosi suddenly spoke. "But you always said you wanted to become a lawyer." Obiageri smiled faintly. "Dreams can wait." Mrs. Okafor's eyes filled with tears again. "You are still a child, Obiageri." Obiageri reached out and held her mother's hand. "No, Mama," she said quietly. "Not anymore." The next morning, before the first ray of sunlight touches the rooftop of Onitsha, Obiageli woke up. Obiageli tied a scarf around her head and stepped outside the house. She had no job, no connection, no experience, but she had determination. Her first stop was a small restaurant near the busy road. The owner looked at her carefully. "We already have enough workers." She tried another shop. No vacancy. Another place. No. Again, no. By midday, the sun burned fiercely above the town. Sweat rolled down Obiageri's forehead. Her feet hurt from walking, but she refused to give up. Finally, she approached a small roadside food store where a middle-aged woman was frying akara. The woman looked up. "What do you want, young lady?" "I am looking for a work," Obiageri said politely. The woman examined her closely. "What can you do?" "I can cook, clean and serve customers." The woman folded her arms. "The pay is small." "That is okay." "You must wake up by 5 every morning." "I will." "You must not be lazy." "I will not." The woman nodded slowly. "All right, you can start tomorrow." Relief flooded Obiageri's chest. Her first job. The pay was very small, but it was the beginning. That evening, Obiageri returned home exhausted but hopeful. The small money she earned from helping at the store felt heavy in her hands. Inside the house, her mother was sitting quietly. When Obiageri placed the money on the table, Mrs. Okafor stared at it silently. Then tears began to fall down her cheeks once again. "You should not be the one doing this." Obiageli gently hugged her. "It is only for now." But deep inside her heart, Obiageli knew the truth. This was the only beginning of long road of sacrifice, and she had no idea how far that road would stretch. Life in the Okafor household slowly found a new rhythm, though it was a rhythm built on a quiet struggle and relentless effort. Every morning, Obiageri Okafor was already awake. The town at that hour was peaceful. The unusual noise of traders and bus conductors had not yet begun. A cool breeze moved through the narrow streets, carrying the faint scent of wet earth and distant cooking fires. Obiageri would quietly step out of the bed. Obiageri would quietly step out of bed so she would not disturb her siblings. Her long braids were tied neatly behind her back as she wrapped a scarf around her head and slipped into her worn sandals. Before leaving the house, she already checked on her mother. Mrs. Grace Okafor slept lightly these days. Since the death of her husband, her health had become fragile. The doctor had warned them about her blood pressure, and Obiageri consistently worried about her. Satisfied that her mother was resting, Obiageri would step outside into the cool morning air and begin her walk to work. The roadside food store where she worked was already busy by sunrise. Customers came in waves, bus drivers, traders, laborers and travelers heading to the market. From early morning until afternoon, Obiageri worked tirelessly. She washed plates, served food, cleaned tables and helped prepare meals. Her hands were always moving. But when the store called to the day, Obiageri did not go home to rest. Instead, she hurried to another job. At a small supermarket nearby, she spent several more hours sweeping floors, arranging goods and cleaning the shop before closing. Many evenings she returned home exhausted, her body aching and her feet swollen. But whenever she saw Kosi and Nnenna studying under the dim glow of kerosene lamp, something inside her filled with quiet satisfaction. Her sacrifice had purpose. Over time, Obiageri realized something important. If she wanted to provide a better future for her siblings, she needed to earn more money. So she decided to learn a skill, hairdressing. In their community, braiding hair was not just a skill, it was a livelihood. Women constantly needed their hair tied for church services, weddings, and celebration. Obiageri approached a small salon owned by a woman named Madam Rita. The salon was lively, filled with the sounds of laughter, gossip, and the clicking of hair beads. "Why do you want to learn this work?" Madam Rita asked. Obiageri answered honestly, "I want to support my family." The older woman studied her face for a long moment before nodding. "Alright, but it will not be easy." Obiageri did not mind. She had never been afraid of hard work. At first, she only swept the salon floor and washed customers' hairs. But slowly, she learned how to braid neat cornrows and create intricate hairstyles. Her fingers became quick and precise. Soon, women in the neighborhood began asking for her. "Let Obiageri braid my hair," they would say. Little by little, her income improved. But even her skill grew. Obiageri never allowed herself to relax. Every extra money she earned went towards one thing: her siblings' future. Years passed quietly. Kosi grew into a tall, intelligent young man with a deep passion for science and engineering. His teachers often praised him. "This boy has a brilliant future," they told Obiageri. And they were right. When Kosi finished secondary school, he sp- when Kosi finished secondary school, he passed his examination with outstanding results. Not long afterwards, a letter arrived. It was his university admission letter. The family celebrated that day with excitement. Mrs. Okafor cried tears of joy. "My son, you will become a great engineer," she said proudly. But Abiageri knew what the admission letter truly meant: money. A lot of it. University's fees were expensive, and there were many other costs: books, accommodation, feeding. Still, Obiageri did not hesitate. She simply worked harder. 2 years later, another admission letter arrived. This time it was for Nnenna, who had been accepted to study nursing. The small living room filled with laughter and celebration. Neighbors came to congratulate them. Obiageri had done well, people said. "She is like a second mother to those children." Obiageri smiled politely. But deep inside, she felt something else: hope. She believed that one day, when her siblings became successful, they would remember everything she had done. She believed they would take care of her the same way she had taken care of them. That hope kept her going through the long nights and exhausting days. The day finally came when both Kosi and Nnenna graduated from the university. It was a day of celebration. Obiageri sat proudly among the crowd during the ceremony, watching them walk across the stage in their graduation gowns. Her heart swelled with pride. Every sleepless night, every long working day, every sacrifice, it had all led to this moment. Within a year, both siblings secured good jobs. Kosi became an engineer in a construction company. Nnenna began working as a nurse in a private hospital. For the first time in many years, Obiageri felt relief. She believed the heavy burden she had carried for so long would finally become lighter. But life had something unexpected waiting for her. It began with small symptoms. Obiageri often felt tired. Then came frequent headaches. Sometimes she felt dizzy while walking. At first, she ignored it. She had always been strong, but gradually the symptoms became worse. One afternoon, while braiding a customer's hair, Obiageri suddenly collapsed. She was rushed to the hospital. After several tests, the doctor called her aside. His expressions was serious. "Obiageri," he said gently, "you have blood cancer." Her heart stopped. The words echoing in her mind: blood cancer. Treatment would be expensive, very expensive. For the first time in years, Obiageri needed help. One evening, Obiageri called Kosi and Nnenna to the small living room of their family house. The small room where they had spent countless evenings together as children. She explained everything to them: her illness, the doctor diagnosis, the cost of treatment. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "I have done everything I could for this family," she said softly. "Now I need your help." There was silence in the room. Then something happened that Obiageri never expected. Kosi shifted uncomfortably. Nnenna looked away. Finally, Kosi spoke. "Sister, nobody asked you to sacrifice your life for us. The words felt like a knife piercing Obiageri's heart. Nena added quietly, "You made those choices yourself. Nobody forced you." Obiageri stared at them in disbelief. Her chest tightened. The room seemed to pin around her. For years, she had believed that love and sacrifice would be remembered. But in that moment, her hopes shattered. Tears filled her eyes. She could not speak. She simply stood up and walked slowly into her room. When Mrs. Okafor heard what had happened, she was furious. She confronted her children immediately. "Have you both forgotten who raised you? You stupid children," she demanded. Her voice trembled with anger. "That girl gave up her entire life because of you both." Relatives soon heard about the situation. Many of them began criticizing Kosi and Nnenna. Shame slowly crept into their hearts. They began to remember everything Obiageri had done, the years of sacrifice, the sleepless nights, the countless struggle. Guilt weighed heavily on them. Eventually, Kosi and Nnenna went to Obiageri's room. She was sitting quietly by the window. Her one strong body looked weak. Kosi's voice shook. "Sister, we were wrong." Nnenna knelt beside her. We forgot everything you did for us. I don't even know what came over me to say those harsh words to you. I am so sorry." Tears ran down their faces. "We will not abandon you." For the first time since the painful conversation, Obiageri smiled faintly. But deep inside her, she knew something had already changed. Trust once broken could never fully return back to normal. Still, she chose forgiveness. Her siblings contributed for her treatment, and Obiageri received the best treatment ever in the biggest hospital in Onitsha. Thank you very much for watching my story. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And turn off the notification button for more interesting story. Bye bye.